community organization in Australia, established in 1992. My name is Sriyani Senanayaka. I'm the current president. I would like to give you a brief snapshot of SCAT community services. And we have extended our community services not only to Sri Lankans and the wider community in Australia, but also in the Sri Lankan children in rural areas. And we have a lot of projects that launch in Sri Lanka and here as well. Unfortunately, since last year, we were not able to do a lot of projects, but we had some information session like this over virtual platform. So basically, we have three segments: as SCAT main group, and the senior group, and the youth group, and we get together when we do all the projects and any other community services. So we thinking of the senior group that we have programs on well-being and social welfare and cultural advancement through a variety of activities such as seminars, exercise, and yoga programs, musical programs. We have a monthly sing-along nights and also cultural shows and films. And so I'm not taking a lot of time of you, and I would like to hand over to Dr. Hemanta Rohita to talk about what we are going to do today, and then we will introduce our keynote speaker by Professor Priyan, and then we're going to have the presentation followed by the question and answer sessions. Again, I would like to welcome you all and thank you very much for participation. Over to you, Dr. Hemanta. Can you unmute Hemanta?
Yeah, thank you, Sriyani. Let me invite you all, welcome you all for coming for today once again. And this is another presentation from SCATs. As you know, there has been many presentations on SCATs on web-based to educate people. Now, today's presentation is by Dr. Sanjeeva Hevavitharana, and the presentation title is COVID-19 Choices, Hesitancy, and Misinformation. And I believe correct understanding on the prevention of this pandemic is so important to all of us to end the deaths and the most devastating economic disasters that the pandemic has brought to us. And this is going to be a very valuable learning opportunity for us all. So thank you, Dr. Sanju. There will be a chance to ask questions if you wish, and please use the chat button to send your question, or you can ask when the presentation is over by Doctor. Now, I'm going to hand over to Priyan, Professor Priyan Mendisa, I'm sorry, to introduce Dr. Sanjeeva to you all. I have the honor to do that, to hand it over to Priyan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hemanta, and also Mrs. Sriyani Senanayaka, the president of SCATs. And again, actually, I had to thank a couple of people. First of all, here, Dr. Hemanta for coordinating the event, as a convener, Ms. Sriyani Senanayaka as the president, and also Ms. Sumedha Jayasuriya here as well, being a secretary of SCATs, being part of the organizing committee of this one. And so it's been really congratulate Skats for doing this, because I think it's a really timely topic, and taking the opportunity to use the Zoom, just the online technology. So I will not take too much time, because we all want to listen to Dr. Sanjeeva. I'll just say a couple of things that about Dr. Sanjeeva. Will be very quick. He's an experienced specialist general practitioner with a history of working in metropolitan and rural healthcare industry in Australia, actively involved in COVID vaccination processes. And I remember he gave a talk on COVID, so he's been scientifically following COVID for a long time, and been the front line, talking to people and as a GP, and also got a lot of experience doing that in this topic and other topics. So this is probably be asked from him all the time. So he's really very experienced and well qualified to talk about this topic. He's also graduated from Western Australia and fellow of the College of Royal Australian General Practitioners. Again, as I'm repeating here, but he's a highly qualified person to talk about this topic. So rather than taking a lot of time, can I hand over to Dr. Sanjeeva?
Thank you very much, Professor, for the kind introduction. So without talking too much, we'll start the presentation. So, all right. So let me start with the sharing my screen. Right. So as we talk about, this is kind of, one of the most important aspects of this century, because as we all know, the COVID is a pandemic and it has taken the whole world over. So every life is affected, and the whole world is in a different place now. So for the last couple of years, so that's why the vaccine has become such an important aspect of this time. So if you think about this century, probably one of the most important kind of development of this century is this COVID vaccine. I think that people will say that in time to come, this is probably one of the most important aspects for the humankind. So that's why we thought about it's a good thing to talk about this vaccine and the choices we have, and also there's a lot of hesitancy due to this vaccine because everything is so new, and also a lot of misinformation around. So I think that's why we came across to this topic to discuss a bit more. So just before we talk about the vaccines in detail, let's talk about different types of COVID vaccines. So there are 4 different types of COVID vaccines in the market now. So first one is an inactivated or weakened vaccine, virus vaccine, which uses the form of the virus that has been inactivated or weakened. So it doesn't cause the disease, but it still generates an immune response. So this type of vaccine, if you take as an example, is the Chinese vaccine, is the Sinopharm and Sinovac vaccine. So that is the old technologies, because we know a lot of vaccines are the inactivated or weakened virus vaccine. So the Chinese has developed on the same form for a COVID vaccine as well. So that's one of the types of these vaccines. The next type is called protein-based vaccines. What they use, which uses harmless fragments of proteins or protein shells that mimic the COVID-19 virus to safely generate an immune response. So the example for this vaccine type is called a Novavax vaccine, which is being developed in USA at the moment, but it has not come to the market because they are still in the phase 3 studies at the moment. So that's something to come in the future. So we don't know too much about this type of vaccines at the moment. Another type of vaccine is called a viral vector vaccines, which we are very kind of familiar with, which is an example is AstraZeneca is a viral vector vaccine, and also Sputnik, the Russian vaccine, is a viral vector vaccine, and also the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is again a viral vector vaccines, which they use a safe virus that cannot cause a disease, like safe virus like a human adenovirus or chimpanzee adenovirus. That's a safe virus which cannot cause the disease, but serves as a platform to produce coronavirus proteins to generate an immune response. So that's the basis of that type of vaccines. And the last but not the least, the RNA and DNA type vaccines. It's a cutting edge approach. This is the first time ever being used on humans. This is the cutting edge vaccine approach. They use a genetically engineered RNA or DNA to generate a protein that itself safely promotes an immune response. So that's the latest, the Pfizer and Moderna. So those are the latest types of vaccines available for the humanity. So those are the 4 types. So let's go to next slide. And briefly, we'll look at the COVID-19 vaccination status in Australia. So far, we have developed over 5 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines in Australia as of June. And over 3.6 million of doses are AstraZeneca, and the rest is a Pfizer vaccine. So currently, there's only 2 vaccines being administered in Australia. Third one is yet to come in a few months' time, the Moderna, which I'll talk about down the line. So those are the only 2 vaccines at the moment available in Australia. So 2 deaths, which we need to talk about this as well, because I'll be talking much more in detail later, which is 2 deaths. Both, unfortunately, were both females, aged 48 and 52, due to blood clots in brain has been reported up to now, and also 15 cases of serious clotting events due to AstraZeneca out of 3.6 million. So if you think about the number of vaccines administered here is 3.6 million. So there's only under 20 serious cases, like 15 cases of serious clotting events due to this vaccine, plus 2 deaths. So those are the number of serious issues happened so far in this vaccination effort. So just comparing with Sri Lanka as well, because obviously it's closer to heart always, like over 2.4 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine doses administered as early June in Sri Lanka. So it's about half of what has been administered in Australia. So if you look at the rest of the world, both countries are not doing so well in giving the vaccines. So we are a bit lagging behind. So we are going a bit slowly in this aspect. Now let's look at what are the choices, what are the different types of vaccines we have. So we talk about this Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and then there's a Pfizer vaccine available, and then there's a Moderna, that's another mRNA vaccine, and then Sputnik vaccine, which we talk about. It's again viral vector vaccine similar to AstraZeneca, which is available, and also Sinopharm. So the first 3 vaccines, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Moderna, those are the main vaccines will be available to Australia. And then other ones, Sputnik and Sinopharm, is not available in Australia, but they are available in different parts of the world, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. So let's talk about the most talked about vaccine, which is Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which has a lot of a lot of things around which we have been talking about, these blood clots and all these things. So that's why it becomes very important at this stage to understand exactly what's going on and how to deal with this vaccine. So the main thing about this vaccine is it's cheaper to make per dose, and it can be stored and transported and handled in normal refrigeration for at least 6 months. So that has been one of the main markers of this vaccination. So that's why it has been so much available to a lot of parts of the world, and it's been given in such a huge number of doses. So that's the strength of this vaccine. So if you look at how well it works, the AstraZeneca has updated its data analysis for phase 3 trials, which is in March this year, showing the vaccine has to be 76% effective at reducing the risks of symptomatic disease 15 or like 2 weeks after receiving the 2 doses. So it's effective about 76%. And also 100% against the severe disease. That is very important. So whoever has this 2 doses of AstraZeneca, almost guaranteed will not get the severe disease. They could still get some form of COVID disease, which is like a cold-like symptoms, but almost guaranteed you will not go to a hospital, or you will not get anything, significant after receiving the 2 doses, which is a really good thing about this vaccine. Also, the company said about this vaccine is 85% effective preventing COVID-19 in people over 65. So that's another huge advantage. So the community above 65, the efficacy is much higher. So no, under 65, the efficacy is about 76%, but age above 65, the efficacy is much higher, 85% effective. So that's a really good thing about this vaccine as well. So how it is given? 2 doses, 12 weeks apart. The same vaccine you give 12 weeks apart, so as a booster. So, and when we think about the vaccine, we have to think about all these variants, because that's the most talk of this time now. All these variants coming in UK, Brazil, India, all these variants. How does it work against these variants? It's effective against the UK variant as well as Brazilian variant, but it is not as effective in the South African variant. So, because one of the Indian variants is a kind of mutation of a UK variant, so it has been effective in that aspect as well, so which is a good thing. So now let's talk about the side effects of the AstraZeneca vaccine, so which we need to talk about in great detail. So the most common side effects are the local area side effects. That's a local area is where we give the vaccine into your arm. So most likely the pain, swelling, redness, itchiness, swelling, armpits, and glands. So this affects 2 in 3 people. So very, very common. So like when we think about the flu vaccine, hardly lot get side effects, but compared to that, the COVID vaccines, these kind of local area side effects are very common. So affects almost everybody. So everybody we talk about has some kind of a side effects. So that's very, very common, but nothing to worry about. They are very self-limiting side effects. Doesn't take very long time to get through. So again, we are talking about systemic side effects. Those are the side effects affects the whole body, like a diarrhea, fatigue, headache, chills, and nausea. Those kind of side effects being affected fewer than 1 in 4 people. Still, it's a significant number if you think about it. 1 in 4 is 25% of the population will get systemic side effects. But again, these are not that things to worry about, because they are kind of self-limiting within 24 to 48 hours. They will limit within a couple of days. So again, another thing about this vaccine is side effects are more common among women. Also people age 55 years or younger, and mostly after the second dose. So side effects are more prominent after the second dose, and again more common in younger age groups under 55, and more common in women. So that's why the AstraZeneca has been a good vaccine for the community above 60 years old, or 60 or 50 years old. So because it's less side effects and more effective. So overall, the most side effects will resolve within up to 24 to 48 hours. So that's not too much anything to worry about. But the other most important thing is a very rare side effect involving blood clotting with low platelet count, which is called thrombosis, which is the blood clotting is we call thrombosis, and the low platelet count we call thrombocytopenia. So that the syndrome called thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, TTS. So that is a very rare syndrome which started occurring after the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Always has been after first dose, so not after the second dose. So this has been for the first 3 months of vaccination in Europe, this started, and suggests this occurs about 4 to 6 people in a million. So it's not much, but up to 4 to 6 in a million can have this kind of rare syndrome occurring. So let's talk about what is this rare syndrome. It can be very serious and can cause long-term disability and death. And this condition causes thrombosis, which is blood clotting, which I talk about, and thrombocytopenia, low platelet counts. But it is different from general clotting disorders we talk about. Deep vein thrombosis is a very common clotting disorder, which we get blood clots in our lower legs and calf area. And again, these blood clots can go into your lungs and cause a pulmonary embolism. But this clotting disorder, TTS, totally different. It's not in the same line. It happens in different areas, and the mechanism is totally different, because with that one, the platelet goes down as well, which doesn't happen with the deep vein thrombosis. So we need to understand there's a total huge difference between these two. Even though they are blood clotting disorders, they are totally different. The mechanism is totally different. So this TTS can occur at different parts of the body. Majority in the brain is called cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, and also in the abdomen. So those are the most common areas where this TTS can occur. So when does this TTS typically can occur? So TTS typically occurs around day 4 to 28 after the vaccination with the AstraZeneca vaccine, first dose. So it's not like within first couple of days, always has been day 4 plus, and it can occur up to day 28. So that's the time we need to keep an eye on, if you're getting anything of that line. So, and we think about how common is this TTS? It's very, very rare. Currently estimated to affect 4 to 6 people out of 1 million who receive the AstraZeneca vaccine, who's older than 60. So if it's anybody about 60 years old, it's very, very rare. So 4 to 6 out of 60. But if you look at the community under 50 years of age, rate is going to be 10 times. It's like up to 20 to 40 people out of 1 million. So that's a concerning number. So about 4 to 10 times of somebody above 60. So that's a concerning number. So again, we're talking about any groups more at risk. The rate of TTS reported in Australia is higher in younger adults, and it's more common in women. So that's what the research has found so far. So what symptoms does TTS usually cause? This is again, very important thing. So what it's going to cause. So it's a severe persistent headache. The most common symptom, severe persistent headache with some additional features. So usually appears 4 days after the vaccination, and it does not improve with simple painkillers. Also, may be worse when lying down, and also accompanied by nausea and vomiting. So all this can happen or may not happen, but headache is more kind of a prominent feature of this disease. And again, other than the headache, this can give some neurological symptoms such as blurred vision, difficulty with speech, drowsiness, or seizures. So those are the things to watch for as well. And also it can cause a bit of shortness of breath, chest pain, swelling in your legs, and persistent abdominal pain. Also, it can give some tiny blood spots under the skin away from the site of infection. So it's not at the site of injection, but it can give tiny blood spots under the skin away from the area, so which we need to look for as well. Also, a general feeling of systemic unwellness, like you feel full body unwellness, like beyond 4 days after the vaccination, something you have to not to disregard, something you have to look for some help. So if you see any of these kind of symptoms in 4 to 28 days after the first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine, mostly after the first dose. So far, everything has been after the first dose. So the first dose went well, there hasn't been anything after the second dose. So if you encounter any of these kind of symptoms, you should seek medical attention immediately. So that's the most important thing anybody should do after this vaccine. Let's look at some studies which has done about these blood clotting events in different parts of the world. There's one study published in New England Journal of Medicine. It's done in Germany and Austria. That's called vaccine-induced TT. That's the same disease, vaccine-induced TTS. So they found about 11 patients, but out of them 9 were women, and their median age is about 36 years. So they were ranging from ages 22 to 49. So their blood clotting, the thrombotic event, happened 5 to 16 days after the vaccination. Unfortunately, almost 54% mortality, which is like 6 patients out of 11 has died of this. So, and another study has done again, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, was done in UK about this vaccine-induced TTS post-AstraZeneca. So they found about 23 patients. Again, majority were women, like 14 were women, and their median age was 46. So 16 patients out of 23, about 70% younger than 50. They did have some patients older than 50 as well, as we talk about, like because still about 70, 60 plus, you can have 4 in million. So that's why, so we can have still some patients above 50 as well. So for them, the thrombotic event happened about 6 to 20 days after the vaccination. So the blood clotting happened about 6 to 24 days after the vaccination. Unfortunately, 7 people, about 30%. So that's why the one in 4 chance of dying with this disease. So by looking at all, these are the groups which can receive AstraZeneca vaccine, because when we talk about blood clotting, then everybody worried about, do I have a problem, or do I qualify for this, or do I get, because I have other medical issues, would this cause more problems for me? So when people with the past history of venous blood clots in like typical size, like which we talk about the deep vein in legs, it's called deep vein thrombosis, like blood clots in the legs, and also blood clots in the lungs, which because the blood clot forms in the leg and then dislodges and go and hit the lungs. So it's called pulmonary embolism. So those kind of history, people with those kind of blood clotting history still can have AstraZeneca vaccine, because that blood clot has no association with causing any TTS kind of clotting disorders. Also, people with the predisposition to form blood clots. There are certain people with certain genetic genes called factor V laden, or there are few different genes which can cause blood clots. They usually come in genetics with in the genetic predisposition. So, or non-immune blood clotting disorders, those kind of people can still have the AstraZeneca vaccine. That doesn't put them increased risk for TTS. So that's very important as well. Also, people with a family history of clots or clotting conditions. Family history of clots or clotting conditions, they are not in increased risk for TTS, which is reassuring. Also, people currently receiving anticoagulant medications like, warfarin, aspirin, or newer anticoagulations like rivaroxaban, apixaban. If you're on any of these anticoagulants, you are not at an increased risk for anything with AstraZeneca. Also, people with a history of ischemic heart disease or stroke, heart attacks or strokes are not in increased risk for receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine as well. And also people with current or past history of low platelet levels, called thrombocytopenia. So if they have any kind of history of current past history, they are not at an increased risk of TTS due to AstraZeneca, which is a good thing. So who should not get the AstraZeneca vaccine? So AstraZeneca is not recommended for anybody under 50, and also not recommended for people above 50 with these conditions. There are few conditions which we need to be aware of, which we don't recommend. Above 50 with these conditions, they are not recommended to go for AstraZeneca. That's the past history of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. That's a very specific condition. Also past history of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Heparin is again another blood thinner. So if you had some blood low platelet counts due to heparin and in the past, then you are susceptible to that condition. So you should not have the AstraZeneca vaccine. Also a past history of idiopathic, like no reason. That's abdominal venous thrombosis, like abdominal veins, the blood clots in the abdominal veins called mesenteric, portal, or splenic. So those are the different veins in the stomach. If they have any clots in those areas, you should not have AstraZeneca vaccine. Also history of antiphospholipid syndrome, or thrombosis, or thrombosis with the thrombocytopenia, TTS. If you have any history of these kind of syndromes, you should not have the AstraZeneca vaccine. Also history of PEG. That's PEG is a kind of a oily liquid which is used, a petroleum product which is used as a kind of one of the parts of this AstraZeneca vaccine. So if you have any history of allergy to PEG or polysorbate, that's again a component of the AstraZeneca vaccine. If you have any kind of allergic reaction to this kind of materials, you should not have the AstraZeneca vaccine. Further, people with anaphylaxis to previous dose of COVID-19 vaccine, AstraZeneca or an ingredient of the vaccine which I talk about, you should not have the vaccine. Also, the thrombocytopenia TT occurring after first dose of vaccine should not have the second dose as well. Also, any other serious adverse events attributed to the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine should not consider the AstraZeneca vaccine. So these are the conditions we should not have the AstraZeneca vaccine. So because we talk about a lot of blood clots, so we need to put this in a perspective to compare, the risks of clotting. So with AstraZeneca, the blood clot risk is 4 in 1 million. But compared to that, people on birth control pills have a much higher chance of, but it's not the same type of blood clots, but different type of blood clots in the legs and things like that. So there'd be much higher number, about 500 to 1,200 cases in a million. So that's much higher number due to birth control pills. Smoking, again, one of the risk factors, blood clots, about 1,763 cases in 1 million. So it's much higher number of chance getting a blood clot due to the smoking. But if somebody getting the COVID infection, the chance of blood clots is going to be extremely high, about 165,000 in 1 million. That's why a lot of people die after getting COVID due to blood clotting issues. That's the reason, because you get blood clots, then you get heart attacks, and then people die. So that's why it's very important. We have to put this risk of blood clots in a perspective. So where we need to understand where we stand in this blood clotting risk. All right. So after talking about this AstraZeneca, let's talk about the next vaccine, the Pfizer. So this was the first COVID-19 vaccine to receive emergency approval by the Food and Drugs Administration in USA. So after the company repeated positive clinical data, which include news that the vaccine is about 95% effective at preventing the disease. But the problem with this vaccine is it has very strict requirements involving how the vaccine is stored. For instance, it needs like ultra cold temperature units, about under 94 Fahrenheit. It's minus 94 Fahrenheit temperatures, ultra cold temperatures, to keep this cold chain for this vaccine, which has been a challenge for a lot of countries to acquire this vaccine. But in this year, 2021, the February, the company submitted new data demonstrating that the stability of the vaccine at temperatures more commonly found in pharmaceutical refrigerators and freezers. So now recently they found that unopened vials are permitted to be stored and transported between minus 25 to minus 15, which is like obviously more pharmaceutical based refrigerators, not very, very ultra cold, special refrigerators. They can be kept up to 2 weeks. So that gives some kind of relief for the different certain, like, developing nations to acquire this Pfizer vaccine. And also they found that unopened vials can be stored at domestic refrigerators, temperatures like normal 2 to 8, up to 5 days, which has been a really good thing. So that, like any other flu vaccines or anything, usually we keep it in 2 to 8 degrees and normal refrigerator. So this can be kept about 5 days in those kind of refrigerators now. So Pfizer is usually recommended 16 years or older, anybody about 16 and older, and they come in 2 shots, given 21 days apart. So how does it work? This is an mRNA, as I told you, it's an mRNA vaccine that sends the body's cells instructions to make a spike protein. So it will only send the instructions. So it won't send a part of the virus or full virus or anything like that. It just sends the instructions for the body to make proteins. And then those spike proteins on the body after reading those instructions, the body will make the spike protein, which will be recognized by the immune system in the future. So that's the kind of mechanism for this Pfizer vaccine. So what are the common side effects for this Pfizer vaccine? So chills, headaches, tiredness, pains or redness, swelling at the injection site, which has been more common side effects. So all of them, which generally resolves within about 2 days with the rest, hydration and Panadols, things like that. If symptoms doesn't resolve within 72 hours, or if you have more than 3 days with the respiratory symptoms such as cough, shortness of breath, then you need to see a doctor to see if anything else going on beyond that. But on rare occasions, mRNA vaccines have triggered anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction to some people. And it has been treated with adrenaline, which is a drug you can find in EpiPens, which is we give in those anaphylactic kind of scenarios. So that's why it's for that reason, we need to observe everybody 15 minutes after the COVID vaccine, which we do, and also about 30 minutes if they have a history of allergic reactions or taking blood thinner. So the main question about how well it works on the mutations, which is very important at this stage. As of early May, the vaccine is found to be more than 95% effective against a severe disease or death from the variants detected in UK variant as well as South African variant. So that's a good thing. So it's very effective against different types of variants so far. So let's talk about the other mRNA vaccines, Moderna, which is supposed to arrive in Australia, I think, in the last quarter of the year. So we're not sure at the moment what's the availability or anything like that, but this is going to arrive so towards the end of the year. So it's the second vaccine authorized in USA after Pfizer as an emergency use. It's again an mRNA vaccine using the same technology as a Pfizer, with a similarly high efficacy preventing the symptomatic disease. But there are two key differences. This Moderna vaccine, unlike the Pfizer vaccine, doesn't need those very, very high freezing temperatures to keep long-term storage. So they can be kept in a standard freezer temperatures and stored up to 30 days at 2 to 8 degrees, about 30 days. So that's a really good thing. So it can be, that means it can be distributed in GP clinics and everything. So as a normal flu vaccine, similar to a flu vaccine, or similar to AstraZeneca. So that will be one key factor in the future to get this vaccine. Also, the Moderna vaccine is slightly less effective in clinical trials, about 86% in people who are age 65 and older. So that's again one of the marked differences. Like AstraZeneca becomes more effective in 65 and above, but Moderna is less effective in 65 and above. So that's another major distinction between these vaccines. So how many doses? There's still 2 shots, 28 days apart. And what are the common side effects? Fatigue has been very common with the Moderna vaccine, about 70%. Headache has been very common, 64%. And muscle pain, again, 61% has been very common, muscle and joint pains. So chills, nausea, vomiting, and fever also been common side effects. So, but this, for the Pfizer's and Moderna, the side effects were more prominent after the second dose, not the first dose, which I will talk about later, why it is more common after the second dose, and usually last about 2 to 3 days. These kind of side effects more common after second dose and last about 2 to 3 days. And again, how well it works, about 94% effective at preventing symptomatic infection in people with no evidence of previous infection. Further, they appear to have high efficacy in clinical trials among people in diverse ages, sexes, races, and ethnicity categories, and also a person with an underlying medical conditions. But the catch is the efficacy rate drops to 86% for people 65 and above. If you're looking at different variants, all the research suggests that quite effective against UK as well as South African and Latin American Brazilian variants. So it has been effective against all the variants so far. So let's talk about the Sputnik 5. It's again a controversial vaccine. So will not be available in Australia, but it will be in a lot of developing countries, including Sri Lanka as well. So the Lancet, which is like one of the most respected medical journals, reporting data from an ongoing phase 3 clinical trials in Australia. So from this large-scale human trial, they declare the vaccine to be 91% effective in preventing symptomatic COVID-19 in adults. So they, again, similar to AstraZeneca, they use a modified adenovirus vector. They use the human adenovirus. In AstraZeneca, they use the chimpanzee adenovirus. That's the difference. And this is like coal-like virus, which genetically engineered to carry the DNA code to COVID-19 spike protein. The tool the pathogen uses to break, it's a tool to pathogen uses to break and enter the human cells. The virus in this vaccine cannot replicate but deliver enough spike protein to generate an immune response. So, and then it requires about 2 doses at an interval of 21 days. But the difference about Sputnik is each 2 doses use different types of adenoviruses. First dose is they use a type called type 26, and then the booster dose with type 5. So the reason why they use the using 2 different types of adenovirus is because different types using 2 different types, it's to lower the possibility of the body developing antibodies against adenovirus after the first dose, which could make the second dose ineffective. That's another issue with these adenovirus vaccines. If you try to give the same two same types again and again, the body can develop antibodies against adenovirus after a number of doses. That will reduce the effectiveness of the vaccine. So that's why the Russian vaccine has used 2 different adenoviruses to counteract that issue. So side effects, if you talk about the interim analysis of phase 3 clinical trials, again published in Lancet journal in February this year, reports the efficacy and safety of the vaccine. Based on this data, the most common side effects are flu-like illnesses, headaches, fatigue, and injection site reactions. So unlike the other vaccines, the Sputnik and Sinopharm vaccines, there's not much research data available for us to get a good understanding, but there are some data is available, so we just need to go with that. So authors of these papers state about 45 people out of 16,000 participants received the vaccine reported serious adverse events, including the deep vein thrombosis, strokes, and hypertension. But however, according to this paper, the independent data monitoring committee confirmed that none of these were considered related to the vaccine. So that's, again, very kind of, there's not too much data available for us to understand these claims. And a small independent study in Argentina found that antibodies from people who had received both doses of Sputnik 5 is effective against the UK variant. It has been effective, but less effective against the South African variant. So similar to AstraZeneca, it's effective against UK, but less effective against the South African version. So along with Russia, 64 countries have been approved Sputnik 5 up to this date as a vaccine for COVID-19 in their countries. And also it is available in dry form, and it significantly allows the logistic distribution in international markets in normal temperatures, in normal freeze temperatures, 2 to 8 degrees. So that has been an advantage of this vaccine as well. So let's talk about the Sinopharm vaccine, the Chinese vaccine. So unlike mRNA, and we talk viral vector like Sputnik and AstraZeneca, and subunit vaccines like we talk about Novavax, inactivate vaccine contains the entire COVID COVID-19 virus. It has the entire virus, but virus is chemically modified and inactivated. So it has the full virus, but it is inactivated, so it can't cause the disease. So that's the way this Sinopharm, Sinovac, and Bharat Biotech, all of them, they use the inactivated virus, but they use a chemical called beta propiolactone to inactivate the virus so that it can't cause the disease to these people. So because the virus is inactivated, it can't make extra copies, so then it can't develop into the disease. So that's why it's inactivated. But the problem with this type of inactivated virus is these type of vaccines does not produce a strong immune reaction as some other types, and the resulting immunity as well may not be as long lasting as the other kind of types of products. So that has been a bit of a limitation. So, but Sinovac, Sinopharm, and Bharat Biotech, they try to use an adjuvant, another material, to generate a stronger immune response. So we just need to see in the future whether that has been a success or not, whether that's going to be the, because in general, these inactivated viruses does not produce strong enough immune response, or whatever the immunity doesn't last long enough. So that has been the marker of these in the past. So they give about, again, 2 doses, 3 to 4 weeks apart. The recent efficacy trial, a large multi-country phase 2 trial, has shown that 2 doses administered at an interval of 3 weeks, 21 days, have an efficacy of 79% against symptomatic COVID-19 infection 14 or more days after the second dose. Vaccine efficacy again against hospitalization again was about 79%, similar to the normal efficacy. Hospitalization is about 79. If you compare with the AstraZeneca, efficacy against hospitalization is about 100%. So it's a foolproof. But here, efficacy against hospitalization is low as well. But another issue we found was about the variants. This vaccine has not yet been evaluated in the context of circulation in widespread variants of concern. So this is as per WHO. So they will update recommendations accordingly, but they have not yet been evaluated in the context of these new variants, how this is going to act. That has been a problem with this vaccination, Sinopharm. It does work with the basic kind of COVID-19, but they don't know how these different variants going to work with this vaccination. So we are talking about is it safe? Vaccine has recommended its use for people age 18 and above. Safety data has limited for person above. They have limited data for the age groups above 60, because so far there's a very small number of participants in this clinical trials about 60 years of age. They may have administered, but the trials have done is very limited at the moment about this vaccine. So that has been a limitation. So after that, let's talk about the pregnancy, because pregnancy has been an issue so far for the COVID-19 vaccinations. But now recently, a joint statement between Royal Australian College of Gynecologists and also Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunizations, ATAGI, they recently published on the 9th of June. They recommended for pregnant women to routinely offer the Pfizer vaccine, mRNA vaccine, at any stage of pregnancy. So they are safe to have the Pfizer vaccine at any stage of pregnancy. That's because the risk of severe disease of COVID-19 is significantly higher for pregnant women and their unborn baby. So that's why they recommend for the Pfizer vaccine at any stage of their pregnancy. So global surveillance data from a large number of pregnant women have not identified any significant safety concerns with mRNA vaccines given at any stage of pregnancy, which is a good thing. Furthermore, there's also evidence of antibody in breast milk or blood cord, which can give some protection for the infants through passive immunity. So they will get immunity through the milk as well, which is work for the infant as well for some time. As far as they get breastfed, they will get immunity through the mother, so which is a good thing. So pregnant women are encouraged to discuss the decision in related to the timing of the vaccination with their health professionals. So that's an important thing. Another topic is a very hot one we are talking about these days, is a mix and matching of the COVID vaccines. So there has not been, it's a very, very new topic, and there have not been too many research around this, but let's look at few research available. So it's a preliminary results from the trial for more than 600 people, announced in an online presentation on the 18th May, are the first to show benefits of combining different coronavirus vaccines. A UK trial of a similar strategy reported the safety data last week and is expected to deliver further findings and immune response soon as well. So this few research is on the way that they're coming about these mix and match vaccines. So because of the reason they have started this, because of the safety concerns.
Motorcycle
Sorry, so because of these safety concerns, several European countries are already recommending that some of all people who were given the first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine to get another vaccine as the second dose. So that has been one of the concerns in the past in the European Union. So that's why they have gone through this pathway. So researchers hope that such a mix and match vaccine regimens will trigger a stronger, more robust immune response than with the 2 doses of the same vaccine, while simplifying immunization efforts for countries facing supply issues. Because if you can mix and match, again, it will work for if you're having some supply issues in the certain countries, which we know, like a lot of places, even in Australia, we're having a supply issue at the moment. We are not getting enough doses of certain vaccines. So that's why they have put some constraints on these certain age groups and all these things, for this vaccine. So if they can mix and match, then it'll simplify all these problems in the future. So that's why they are doing this research at the moment. So starting in last April, the Spanish Combivax trial, they have enrolled about 663 people who had already received the first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine. And out of them, like about 600, they have used about two-thirds of participants randomly picked to receive the Pfizer vaccine. So as a second one, about 8 weeks after the first dose, so 8 weeks after the AstraZeneca vaccine. So, and they had a control group, about 200 people who has not received a booster. So they kept the control group, and then the vaccination group, they gave the Pfizer vaccine. And then they checked the response. So Pfizer booster seemed to increase the immunity of the AstraZeneca participants. They have reported that after the second dose, participants began to produce much higher levels of antibodies than they did before. And these antibodies were recognized and inactivate in the laboratory tests. So they have developed a lot of antibodies. But the control participants who has not received any vaccines, they have not increased any antibody levels. That shows that giving a second different vaccine has increased their immune response. So they have responded better. So, and also they have noted that giving this different vaccine, they have the antibody response is much higher than having same dose. So much higher than having 2 doses of AstraZeneca. So giving first AstraZeneca and then Pfizer, they have better immunity. That's what they have found in these studies. But they don't know how this, at the moment, they don't know how this level of immunity compared to having 2 Pfizer vaccines. At the moment, they have not come up with that number as yet. But again, there's a catch here. again, giving people like 2 doses of different vaccines, it can make sense, but what will happen if people need a 3rd dose to prolong immunity, which we will be anticipating now, because we don't know at the moment how long this immunity of any of these vaccines last. Is it 12 months or is it like more than that? So nobody knows at the moment. That will only come to know in next, probably next year. By that time, we will get to know how long this immunity lasts. So that's where the catch comes in. So if you have to give the 3rd dose, what's going to happen if you're going to mix and match? So that's where the problem comes in. So repeated doses of viral-based vaccines like AstraZeneca or Sputnik or something, they're known to be increasingly less effective because the immune system mounts a response against this adenovirus. That's what I talk about. That's why the Sputnik has developed 2 different doses, so that immune system cannot mount immune response to disregard the vaccine. So that's why they have done it. But if you think about giving the 3rd dose of the same vaccine, then we have to counteract that as well. So that has been a problem. But again, for the RNA vaccines, if you give the 3rd dose, the side effect profile goes higher and higher. So that's what I talk about the 2nd dose on Moderna. When you get the 2nd dose, your side effects are higher. So same with the Pfizer as well. After the 2nd dose, the side effects are higher. So same thing, like if you're going to give the 3rd dose of the RNA vaccine, they tend to get the stronger side effects. So they haven't got a way around for these 2 problems at the moment. So that's why the recent study in UK called COMCO, which is they analyzed the combination of the same 2 vaccines. They found that people mix and match groups experience higher rate of vaccine-related side effects, such as fever, than the people who received the 2 doses of the same vaccine. That's right. So we can think about mix and matching, but again, it comes with the baggage again. So more side effects or immune response is different. So those are the kind of things under consideration at the moment. So these are very, very new things, which will take a long time because you need at least about 8 weeks or longer to mix and match. So that's why it takes very long time for them to compare and then find out what's going on, and then the research data to come out to get a good understanding. So these are the latest developments in this vaccine space. So with that, so I think so far, about 2.26 billion of people has vaccinated for COVID in the world. So that's a good number, but I think very long way we have to go. But talking about that, I would like to end my presentation and then open up for any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjeeva. That was a very highly valuable seminar and a lot of information. And now it's the time for questions. If there's any questions from the audience, they can send a chat or ask. This is the time to ask. But please note that you can ask your questions in Sinhalese or English, both languages. So it's time for questions, if you have any.
Any questions there? Any questions?
Over the top. I don't think many people would have gone to sleep.
I have something to say, if I may, since there are people must be thinking of questions. If I could ask Dr. Sanjeeva, this phenomenon of mixing is quite an interesting one, because that can lead to a lot of new discoveries in future, I think. And there should be acting as a synergist on each other.
Yeah, I think that's it's definitely it's going to be very, very kind of talk about area. So, I mean, there are benefits of mixing as I talk about, but again, there will be a lot of side issues, side effects. And also, you know, so because obviously we are putting two products together, and then as we talk about, like, you know, it's and totally different mechanisms together. So which has not happened in the past. So because we have never given like two different types of vaccines or anything in the past. So this is total, it's again, it's a cutting edge area. Like if you think about like an mRNA vaccine, this is again a very cutting edge area, like, I mean, which will be very interesting to see what's going to happen in the future. But we will find a lot of side effects as well with this. And then, you know, again, like, you know, AstraZeneca is a new thing, you know, we tend to discover these